Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shah Barrett.
I'm Wendy Valla.
And I'm Trudy J. And this week we have Sarra Cannon.
Yay! We're all happy, but Shah's ecstatic.
I'm
Yeah, it's going to be
I'm
fun.
so excited to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Shah's going to be fangirling the entire interview.
I'm going to dial it back because
keep a lid on her.
Keep a little on it.
Awesome. So I'm going to read the bio for Sarra in case you have no idea who she is. And then we're going to get into a discussion on organisation and planning for authors with a little bit, hopefully, about Sarra's journey into publishing and self-publishing. But first, the bio. Amazon top 100 best-selling author Sarra Cannon writes magical contemporary fantasy novels with both teen and college-age characters and lots of twists you'll never see coming. With over 1 million books sold, Sarra loves writing witchy books and connecting with fans. She's also known for her popular YouTube channel Heart Breathings, which has almost 65,000 subscribers and is where she helps authors organise and plan their writing career. Plus, as if that wasn't enough to keep her time going, she has 2 courses, one HB90 and the other Publish and Thrive. Welcome to the spa.
Thank you so much. I've been listening to you guys for a while, so I'm very excited to actually be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
We're excited.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's going to be great. So just to start, can you just give us your journey, how you got into writing and self-publishing, just and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think so for so many of us authors, the journey starts all the way back when we were little, right? Just remembering that first day, 8 years old, too hot to play outside. And my mom hands me The Secret of Nim or Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And I read that book from cover to cover and it was dinner. And I thought, what has just happened? I just got transported to another world. Yeah. And I will never forget that day. Just because after that, I thought, I want to be able to do that. That's magic in the world. But then I found singing and other things and felt a little bit nervous about how do you write a novel? That seems really hard. Yeah. And I kept getting pulled away from it, I think, because I was afraid that I wouldn't know how to do it. And publishing seemed really difficult and only the chosen few got to do it. And then I met a man when I was playing. I have my gaming headphones on today. When I was playing a game called
cute.
EverQuest 2, and I was teaching elementary school music. And he said, move in with me and you can do whatever you want to do for 5 years and I'll support you, which is like a dream moment. It's like fairy godmother moment. And without even realizing from my soul, it was what I wanted to do. I just said, well, I want to be a writer. Wow. And he said, well, come learn how to be a writer and I will be together. And so I had this really beautiful experience of being able to quit my job and go be a writer. And I did also teach music and things like that, but it became permission, which, we shouldn't need permission, but sometimes it feels good to have that permission to say, okay, you're free to explore this creative side of yourself. And so it was harder than I thought it was going to be. And I started to write what everybody else said would sell. Like, oh, you should be writing this type of romance, or Harlequin buys newer authors a lot, so you should try to write that. And so I spent the first few years of that journey trying to figure out what I could sell, and got my first rejection and then got another rejection. And I started paying attention to my friends and was watching what was going on with Amazon and this new Kindle thing. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to spend my life trying to fit what I think an agent and a publisher are going to buy. That's totally a viable path. But I just thought, for me, I'm going to just try to do it myself. So I had the word believe tattooed on my arm, and I started writing what later became Beautiful Demons. And I published my first book in October of 2010. So 13-year anniversary this month.
Wow. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's
yes.
awesome.
It's quite a romantic story, actually.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and it turned out to be such a good bet for him too, because he hated his corporate job. And so within a few years of me publishing, he was able to quit his job, and he has not had to work a job since. So now he plays and develops video games, and he helps out around the house, and we get to be together all the time. So it's
so
just
cool.
been great for
That
all
is
of us.
so
What a
awesome.
great story.
Love it.
Yeah.
And so at what point along that publishing journey did you go, I know, I'm going to start YouTube and do courses? And where did that happen?
You know, I think early on I became what my husband called a self-publishing evangelist, because I loved it right from the start. The freedom, the not having to, get permission, not to write what I wanted to write, to have that creative freedom. And I saw so much potential in it. But at the time in 2010, it was everybody in my like RWA chapter was like, you're ruining your career. It's the worst thing. I can't believe you're doing this. And then within a year, they were all like, can you teach me how you're doing this? Because there were people in that chapter that had been writing for 13 years and never sold a book. And it's not because they weren't great writers. It was just because what they were writing didn't exactly fit what that agent or editor wanted at the exact moment. And so they were like, wait a minute, how did you do that? So within the first year, I started giving workshops and things like that. And back, if you guys, I don't know if you remember, a lot of authors may not, but we used to do courses through like Yahoo loops and things like that, right? So I did a self-publishing course that was just a text course, no videos, through Yahoo loops. And the more I got my name out there through workshops, the more people wanted advice. And it was taking up a lot of my time to give a lot of advice, spend time on Facebook Messenger with people and text messages. And my husband said, you know what, if you would just put all this in a video. And I'm starting to realize now how much my husband has influenced every decision in my career. Let's not tell him that. He said, if you would just put that up on YouTube, then when someone asks you, you could just say, well, here's a video on that. Didn't really work out that way, because I actually love interacting with people. So it's like, I'm not just going to say there's a video. I'm not going to spend my time, because it's part of my passion too, is teaching and encouraging. I'm an encourager and a motivator as much as I can be. And so that was 2018 when I started my YouTube channel. It was February of 2018. And at first I thought it's just going to be self-publishing talk, like tips on how to self-publish. But then I have this obsession with planners as well. And people started asking me like, how are you using that planner? What's that board behind you? Because I had my Kanban boards behind me. And so the more questions I got, the more I started sharing my planners, and found out that actually a lot of writers love planners just as much as I do. Right, Shar?
Yeah. KBAN Board. Yeah, exactly. I think it's I think pretty much all writers are addicted to the stationery store, right? So it's just a continuation.
Yeah. So it's so true.
For people who don't know, how do you say it properly? Kanban board. Is that what you said?
So I say Kanban board, but you'll hear some people say Kanban, which is also fine. So a Kanban board is really something that was developed by an employee at Toyota to help groups work together on a project. So it was a workflow, like a visual workflow, where you'd say, this is what's to be done, this is what's in progress, and this is what's already been done. And I found that visual workflow and started using it somewhere around 2015, when my career was doing the best it had ever done, but I also had a toddler at home, and I felt like I was managing a lot. If only I could go back and tell that version of Sarah. It's only going to get worse. But I started realizing that if I could put the tasks on a Post-it note instead of somewhere that it was out of sight, out of mind, because I didn't work well with Google calendars and things like that, because I didn't want to put every tiny little task, like write an email on a Google calendar and then have it be a notification. But if I just wrote it in a planner and didn't have it somewhere visual, I often just forgot about it or did it too late. And so I thought, okay, I had this process at the time where I would take a Google Calendar and take everything off of it and print it out. It's like a free little printable calendar. And I would grab like every highlighter and color code my schedule and say, this is going to be the year that I write 6 books in a year, and I'm going to schedule out everything just perfectly. And then it would take me like a week and a half to make the plan. And a week or two or a month in, I was so far behind that I either had to become an impossible superhero and write 5,000, 10,000 words a day, or I had to replan. And so I would fall into a depression kind of, and just not do anything for a while except Oreos and discovery, but investigation discovery, a lot of true crime for me. And
you know what? That's a really
eventually...
familiar pattern for a lot of writers, I feel like
I think so. Yeah.
Everyone listening, I'm sure, feels that, like, yeah, they've been through that. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
No, I think it is familiar, because it, especially when you're self-publishing and you're setting your own deadlines, it's like you know that there's an advantage to writing as fast as possible. But when we sit down to plan, we imagine our best selves. Like, it's the Pinterest perfect version of ourselves. Like, this time I can write 2,000 words a day every single day. And the story is going to come together really fast because we want it to. And we see the hope of the future. And we see that strategy of like, wouldn't this be great if I could do this? And then we sit down to actually follow through, and life gets in the way. We get it. Like, I have a little bit of a cold today, don't feel high energy. Might not be a 2,000 word day for me. So then tomorrow I got to write 4,000 words just to stay on top of it. And then you miss 3 days and there's no way, like, you're now completely out of the game. And I couldn't quite figure out how to solve that problem for myself, because the more I got behind and the more stressed I got, the less I could perform. And so the more comfort I got out of the planning process, because there felt like there was hope in the planning, but then the actual doing, I felt like I was constantly a disappointment to myself. And then that turned into constantly a disappointment to my fans or to my family or, whatever. And so I started thinking, I'm either going to spend the rest of my life in this cycle and hating that I chose this career, or I've got to find a solution. And that's when I discovered really planners, which brought me so much joy. And the KBAN Board method, where you can say, here's everything I need to get done. It doesn't necessarily have to happen on a specific schedule, but these are the tasks. And so when I have an off day, I could just pick the easiest tasks on that list and still be moving forward. I can just say, okay, well, I can just do this couple of emails that need to be done, or I can fiddle around with my Pinterest board and make my vision for this character. And that'll be fun. And it'll give me a little bit of joy. And then tomorrow I can write my 2,000 words. And taking that pressure off myself allowed me to not only get more done, but to be more joyful in the process and stop beating myself up, because I could literally see on my wall that I was doing stuff and give myself credit for that. So I sort of broke that cycle for myself.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And I think so often we think about what we haven't done and we focus on that. It's a little bit like focusing on the negative reviews. You can have 1 or 2 of those and 100 positive, but it's those two that stick in your brain. And with the Kanban, like, I haven't taken off my Q3 yet, but that's all I've done. And I can't remember half of them. Whereas if I hadn't have had that, I would have thought, oh man, that, because I had a lot of life happened in the last quarter, and it's very reassuring to know actually I did get that done. I didn't get all of it, but I got that much done. And I think that's the visual is so important. And also, who doesn't love taking a sticky note off and moving it along? It's a visceral pleasure. It's a good win that doesn't involve Oreos or true crime. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but it's too much of a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that Shah's kind of, and you said it as well. There's hope in planning, and Shah's talking about the mental, the visceral
reward,
pleasure, and the Can you talk about that a little bit, because it seems like there's a lot involved. It's just kind of getting your head around doing it. It's not necessarily, like when you fall behind, it's actually it's your head that kind of stops you from keeping going because you feel like you're so far behind. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how do we stop ourselves almost?
So I think, okay, good. Because I think I can work this into something I really, really wanted to talk about today, because this is perfect. Like, here's what I think plagues so many of us is that we want to plan, we want to get control of this massive to-do list, and we want to try to organize it and check things off and get it done because we can see that down the road, here's the future I'll have. I'll make more money, I'll be more established, I'll have accomplished all these things. And then we make the plan. But even when we create a beautiful plan, the more we get done, the more there is to do. Whereas we think the more we get done, the less we have to do, and now we can do other things, right? But the truth is, the way it actually works is the more productive we get, it's almost like a hamster on a wheel that like is just going faster and faster and faster the more that they, that you start moving slowly, and it just builds momentum. And so sometimes I think we're that way too, that we say, okay, I have this much tasks, I have this much time, and when I do those two, combine those things, spend my time on these tasks, I'll have this outcome. And it sounds very equal, but when we free up or we get more organized about these tasks, we start saying, oh, but you know what, I could now do that YouTube channel, because we'll look around and we'll see, well, okay, what am I not doing in my career that it looks like other people are finding success with? And most of us, even if you're making 6 figures a year, most of us still want more. We still want to grow. It's kind of human nature. Like, well, what's the next big thing? I want a viral TikTok that puts my books on the top 100. That would be super cool. So I need time to do TikTok or to reach out to influencers, but I don't have time for that now. So then when we get more efficient with our tasks, we suddenly think, oh, now I have time to add TikTok. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
So, and the number of tasks that we could add to our plate is literally infinite. Like we'll never hit a point where it's like, well, here I am. I've read every book on my TBR and I've done all my tasks for the rest of my life. I think I'll just take a break. Like that's not going to be reality for any of us. So we have to kind of come to terms with the fact that we're not going to be able to do it all. And even if we free up time, sometimes the best use of that extra time is not more work, but rather more rest, more fun, more adventure, more reading. But I think the more we get into this business, the more we feel like if I free up any time, like finally can hire an assistant, finally got done with this book, or finally I'm making a little bit more money, we, instead of feeling like we can relax, we feel like, oh, I don't want to lose what I've built now. Let me work harder. And so we keep adding more. So the tasks are infinite, but the time doesn't change, right?
It's funny how resistant I feel to you saying, instead of doing more work, you should just relax. Like initially I'm like, oh, that sounds, but I could do more TikToks. Like, is that what you find with a lot of people, that they are quite resistant to that idea?
A lot of people are resistant to it. And it's usually one or the other, that I'm resistant to taking the rest because there's a lot of fear, or there's a lot of knowledge of what I'm capable of if I don't rest. Like, oh, but if I don't rest, I could write that extra series or have that extra pen name. And like, what would that future be like? And we're thinking of the future, but we're not really thinking of our day-to-day life and how much more burden that's going to put on us. But when we think about rest, that feels like indulgent, or it feels like what if I it's almost like we're putting our self-worth on our productivity. Like, oh my gosh, if I take a rest, I'm not as worthwhile of a person. Like maybe I'm not trying hard enough to earn this career. Or on the flip side, what I see is someone who feels like there's so many tasks that they haven't yet been able to stack, that they're so overwhelmed they can't do anything at all. And that's where I was when I was watching true crime and,
Eating Oreos.
binge eating all day and just couldn't. It's like I knew all the things, but it was so disorganized and it felt so huge that I was paralyzed to do any of it. And I think most writers are caught in one or the other of those traps.
So what's the ideal then? Is it somewhere in the middle where you take enough rest and work enough? What's enough? Oh my God.
That's hard. And it comes down a lot of times to personality, right? Like some people are happy or busy, and some people will just feel like they got run over by a train. Like we have to understand our own personal capacity for balance, right? And some people need more rest. And that can also be a difficult thing, especially with if you're sensitive to comparison, because maybe the amount of rest you need means that it looks logically like you're never going to be an Amazon #1 bestseller needing all this rest or needing all this extra time. It's not true, because there are examples, if you really look, of people who only wrote one amazing book and it's still a classic, or people who just wrote one series or only write one book a year and make 7 figures. So those examples are out there, but we're so used to seeing the authors who just write a lot of books and end up at the top. But there is a way, I believe, truly, for each individual person to craft a career and a schedule that really aligns with who they are and how they want to live their life. The key and the trick is two tricks. One, knowing yourself well enough to know what it is you need. And number 2, having the courage to really lean into it and not be afraid.
You
That's
do feel like you're a bit of a hamster in a wheel sometimes, don't you? You're like, you're like, I finished that book. I can't celebrate that and get on with the fact that I finished. I'm just going to put that aside, and then I've got to start on the next one, and then I've got to write this and do that. It's like a constant churning,
Right. Well, because it isn't. We don't work in an industry where one book release, especially in self-publishing, just floats you for the next 5 years, right?
Yeah.
If only.
Yeah.
I do think getting savvy about how to market and continue to market your backlist can be helpful, but that's not always an easy thing to do either, because all of the vendors sort of really push front list type books. But at the same time, sometimes we have to try to get our backlist working for us, which I think can be a valuable piece of marketing. But also, it always makes me laugh, because every time we go to see my mother-in-law, she always says to me, "Oh, you're working on another book?"
Yeah.
Well, that's how this works. It's like, you're a writer. There's always another one. There's always another one.
I was talking to someone recently, and they said to me, like, we think, as authors, it's like, oh, we've got to write 6 to 10 to whatever books a year, and it's got to, and you go to someone who's outside the industry and you tell them you've written 2 books that year, and they're like, oh my God, 2 whole books. That's a lot of books, like it's our difference in our perspective, right? And I want to talk, so you talked up a little bit about it. There's a real culture of busyness, or even like money, sort of like, I'm trying to think of how to say this, but like, you have to be busy to make money, and the more you work, the more money you'll make. And you've kind of alluded to it, but there's definitely not a correlation there. So could you just sort of, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that it's just part of culture, capitalistic culture, I don't know, consumerism culture, that we feel like it should be a logical step. I put more products on the market, I make more money. And so even if we have signs that are not pointing to that being the reality for us, we still feel like this has to be the solution, right? Like more books, more products, more money. But I have to tell you, I have friends over the last few years who, when sort of, I call it a regime change, like when Kindle Unlimited sort of started taking over Amazon, it changed a lot of the ways that we sell books across the industry. And there were a lot of people who were doing very well, and then Kindle Unlimited came and their income was decimated by that. And of course, there were other people who thrived in Kindle Unlimited, and that kind of is true for any change in the industry. Is some people will thrive there, and some people will have to rediscover their footing. But a lot of those friends just said, okay, well, now I have to write twice as many books, and then went in pursuit of that, and then ended up having 2 or 3 years that they couldn't write anything at all, because they so thoroughly burned themselves out in the marketing. And then it didn't prove true that more books meant, like, twice as many books meant twice as many dollars in your bank account. And so that lack of getting the outcome that they desired while putting in twice as much work just was very, very difficult on a soul deep level, not just like, oh, this was hard work. Like, heart shattering kind of place. And I think it feels almost like a betrayal, because you say, wait a minute, I'm doing the work. Why can't I put in a penny and get a penny out? Like, why is this, or 2 pennies out? Why isn't this working? And I think it's just a fundamental understanding of the way this industry shifts, because back in the early days, Joe Conrath had a blog that was like the self-publishing guide, or newbie's guide to self-publishing. He was like the guy blogging about self-publishing. And one of the things he said was, the more books you have, the bigger your retirement will be, because every book you put out is going to mean more and more money. And that felt like at the time that was going to be true. And then I think a lot of us that started in the early days that saw that trajectory of up and up and up were just very disillusioned and heartbroken when it turned out that the more writers enter the industry. I don't mean to say that we're competing against each other, but it's just the more choice there is for readers. Sometimes the more some people are going to have to, front list. And it also affects how the, vendors work and what they shift in their algorithms, or how they sell books and how they promote books. It's a difficult part of the industry. And so I think that sometimes it can be worthwhile to just step back from all the noise, from all the shoulds, from all the what everybody else is doing, and even from this feeling of like, I must produce more than I'm humanly capable of, because that is a very hopeless, like, even when I'm saying it, I can feel it in my stomach. I cannot force myself to write more than I'm capable of. And especially like, Shar, I think you said something like life has been lifing like this last quarter, right? When life is lifing, like we traveled for a while because we had lost our home build during COVID. That was a difficult period to write. I had a baby. That was a difficult period to write. Like, there are going to be things in our lives. We're not machines. And it feels very hopeless to think, oh, well, I can't thrive or continue to grow if I'm not putting that out there. And really, if you think about it, like I also exist in a lot of entrepreneurial circles that aren't writer related. And people talk about all the time, like, well, only do the things that only you can do, which for them is like, just show up and make the video and somebody else edits it and all this stuff. But for us, that's like the whole thing. It's like the books, that's the thing that takes so much from us. And it's not just sit down and make an hour video, it's sit down day after day after day and pour your heart onto the page. And that asks, I think our career in particular asks more of us than what a lot of other creative careers do. And I think really the best way to thrive is to step back from that pressure and that feeling of hopelessness of I can't keep up and I'm always behind, and instead sort of put yourself in a little bubble and say, what do I really want my life to feel like on a daily basis? Like it would be amazing to hit #1 on Amazon, right? That would be so awesome. But sometimes we're chasing that because it's what feels right in the moment, or we're chasing that TikTok viral, we're chasing because it's flashy and it gets attention. But when we're just all alone in our writing hole and that's the day-to-day, that's our real life every day. And even if you hit #1 on Amazon, 2 weeks later, you're not there anymore. 2 hours later, maybe you're not there anymore. It's just a blip in time, but our lives are made up of the day-to-day and how we feel on the day-to-day. And I can guarantee you that hitting #1, I've never hit #1 on Amazon, but I have been #1 on Apple and Google. And I mean, that does not make me feel wonderful about every single day of my life thereafter. It was just a moment that was really fun, right? But like when I'm having a hard day now, I can't go, well, I hit #1 on Apple, so my life's made, right? It's like, just because of that doesn't mean you're going to sell all the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you're going to be like comforted by that moment. It's just an achievement. But it's really what matters most is, how do you feel every day in your life with the people that you're with the people that you love, how you're showing up. And when we hit a point where we're exhausting ourselves and we're giving more to this business than we know we should deep down, then we have to take that step back and say, what's realistic for me? And I think there can be a mourning period in that, because we can think, I'm not sure if I slow down to where I need to, that I'll ever hit this goal. And how do I reconcile those two things? And personally, I just feel like I'm big on just positivity and belief. So I know this isn't the way everyone can see things. But for me, I just say, I know I want that outcome, but I also know I'm not going to get there by being really hard on myself and by like stripping my joy away. So I have to just live as joyfully as I can on the day to day and do what I feel is most aligned. That's where the KBAN boards come in. Like, I plan for this quarter. I know what that long-term vision is. And I just hold the faith that if I do what feels good and I lean into the joy, into what is truly most passionate for me, that future is possible for me, one sticky note at a time.
I actually feel like if you're someone who's pushing yourself and constantly rushing and freaking out and overwhelmed, you're actually not going to achieve it either. Like you say, there's a mourning period, but I almost feel like it's like, okay, maybe you feel like you won't get there if you're not pushing yourself, but maybe you're more likely to if you're not doing all those things and kind of being so hard on yourself. Like, it's almost it's kind of the opposite of what maybe you're thinking originally. Sorry, Cher.
I just wanted to say, do you think that some of this is coming from a place of fear, like of not getting to where you should be because of all the people you talk to, and they're saying do this and do that, and you're like, well, if I don't try it, I won't know. So I'm letting myself down, and I'm not going to get to where I should be, or where other people tell me I should be.
I think you're 100% right there. And that is part of, like, we're in this industry together, and we have our friends and our groups, and then we have the bigger groups and the podcasts and, all these things that are amazing because we have such a great community. But at the same time, there sometimes feels like there's that expectation that, like, you want to be at the top of that pack, right? And when you've gotten your 30 books out or 50 books out, like, shouldn't you be up here by now? Like, I got into an elevator with someone at a conference once, and she basically was like, just off the cuff was saying like 300 grand a year or whatever. And she's like, well, Sarah, you probably make that too. And I'm like, no, I have never made that much money in a year off my books, but it was just that assumption of like, well, surely. And then I honestly went back to my room and cried, because I was like, I'm not even making half that right now. So like, should I be? Am I not doing enough? Because I was pretty proud of that 100 grand, but here I am, like, saying that's not good enough. Whereas, like, how many writers would love to be making 100 grand a year?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's sometimes is that hierarchy of feeling like wherever you are, even if it's way beyond what you dreamed, is still never enough, right? And part of that is how we appear to others, that we want to, like, I want to be the person that everybody's like, wow, Sarah just hit #1 on Amazon. Go, go, go. Everybody go get her book. Like, I want to be that person. But I also think that it can be difficult this is kind of where the, like, unlimited tasks continue to come on, because I think at the core of it, we have to just sit back and say, what is my capacity for work? How much time do I realistically have? And most people don't want to go through that process. Like, we go through this process in HB90, like, very meticulously, of how much time do you have? And then how much time do you think all these tasks are going to take? And without fail, people are like, okay, let's use hours. I have, 400 hours in this next quarter to work. But then when they estimate everything out individually, they'll realize they have 3,000 hours worth of work that they were putting on their plate. But because they didn't look at that reality, they're blaming themselves constantly. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do that? Why can't you do that? And then when you add, like Cheryl said, that extra thing of, like, expectations from others, and people are giving you advice, there's this feeling of like, okay, what am I not, like, out of all these hours, I have to choose the things I'm actually able to do. But what if I choose the wrong one? Like, if I know I have to limit what I'm capable of right now, what, I mean, and I'll use TikTok again, because I think it resonates with a lot of people, but I'm not on TikTok at all. And I pretty much on a daily basis hear somebody say that their whole career right now is based on TikTok. And I just keep thinking, am I making a huge mistake? And so I feel that fear of missing out of like, what if that was the thing? What if that was the key that was going to catapult me and all my dreams now come true, right? And that is what keeps us, no matter if we have the time for free time, it's what keeps us pushing to put more and more and more on our plate, because we don't know what that tipping point is going to be. What if it's that next book? What if it's that next TikTok? What if it's that next thing that goes viral? And we live in a society now where that is a possibility. And so I think it's always at our mind of like, what's that one, if I just did one more thing. And the only solution that I have found for myself is that inner alignment and intuition, where I just say, okay, let's take a look at TikTok. Is that really something I think I would enjoy? Is it something that I really would like to give a try? And what does that look like if I tried it for 3 months? What would I have to give up that I'm currently doing to make room for that? And what are the chances with my set of skills and preferences that I would be one of those successful people, or even with my genre? Because I feel like a lot of TikTok success is either mysteries or really sexy romance, or certain kind of genres do better. But I haven't seen as much like just YA contemporary fantasy like I write taking off in that way. There is some, but sometimes we have to look at our genre and say, is that the right tool for me or not? But even if that was something that was going to make a difference, if I can't add it into my life right now in a way that is going to keep me mentally and emotionally healthy and keep my family healthy, it's not worth it, even if I did hit viral success.
It's like a big trade-off, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to put something else into your life that you never had time for before, and you are going to have something up, the likelihood is it's probably going to be family time, or potentially your health. So it's not a good trade-off, is it? If it's not something that you can foresee being easy or a good fit for you, as you said.
Right. And sometimes when we take it on, we're in that hopeful planning mode of like, oh, well, let me just try a few of these and see how it goes, because if it takes off, then I've got this viral success. But then what we've done is we haven't really future casted that into how does this look on a daily basis? Because you can't just throw up one TikTok and suddenly you're viral. Like for some people, they're posting like 11 times a day or something, 4 to 10 times a day. And each one takes them 30 minutes to make or something, and I'm just like, that could be to find the level of success some of those people are finding. You might need to carve out 3 hours a day, or at least 30 minutes a day, like minimum 30 minutes a day. And also, more than just that, using the creative part of your brain to figure out what to put on there, which now maybe you're taking away a little bit of that executive creative function for your books, right? So it is a trade-off. And for some people, it's just super, super easy. And for some of us, it's really difficult. I'm sure you can tell just from listening to me over the last minutes, I am not a short form person. Like I try to make a 10-minute YouTube video and I cannot do it. I cannot get.
For me, it's like, if you do too many things, you're only doing them half well. That was like, I tried TikTok. I did it for 3 months or whatever, and it just drained me, to be honest with you. But I never saw really any results. And I was just like, well, I'm doing this, but I'm on Facebook and Insta, and the writing was getting, and once I got rid of it, like, I think focusing on doing your strength well is better than doing a whole lot of things that you're not strong and good at. And that seems to have worked a lot better for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you find that with people coming into your courses and via the YouTube channel, that people kind of overestimate what they can do? Like you talked about the 3,000 hours and the 400, or how long things will take. Like they think, just TikTok will be 5 minutes a day, it'll be fine. Like, is that?
Yeah.
It's
a real problem. And especially I feel like there are a lot of authors who have ADHD as well. And I think that especially for someone who has ADHD, it can be really difficult to have a sense of how long something will take. So we do actually go through that process.
Trudy's feeling seen.
So we go through the process in the course, but this is something that becomes like a foundational core value for me as a teacher, is making sure everybody understands that not every piece is going to work for you. And so sometimes we have to find ways to sort of go about it. So one thing that I will tell some of my students who have ADHD is, because it's difficult to estimate and get an idea of how long something takes, it's sometimes better to reverse engineer and say, okay, I'm going to sit down and make a TikTok and I'm going to time it. And then do that 2 or 3 times and say, and you could guess, make a game out of it. Okay, I'm going to guess and say it's going to take me 10 minutes. And then try to get it done in 10 minutes, but set your timer so that it feels fun and exciting. Like whatever kind of, I feel like with working with people who have ADHD, I have a lot of symptoms of ADHD, but I've never been diagnosed with it. So I feel like I know some of the tricks just because I have some of the same symptoms, or ways of being, I guess might be a better way of saying it. But I feel like making a game, making it fun, putting a sticker on it, something like that for me makes it a little bit easier to follow through. But I'll say, okay, let's see if I can get it done in 10 minutes. Like I do Instagram reels. And so I'll sit down and then I'll do it. And I'll be like, well, that actually took me 15. And then I'll do it again tomorrow and see if, okay, let's set the timer for 15 and see if I can get it done in 15. Well, today it took me maybe 17. So then I get an average over the course of a week. And sometimes that's an easier way to go about it for some people, rather than just future kind of estimating, which can feel very nebulous and like, I have no idea, which is fine for a task like that. But when it comes to how long does it take you to write a novel, that is much more difficult. And so with things like that, sometimes what I recommend is more of a game board strategy, which I know we don't really have time to fully get into, but the idea of a game board strategy is, instead of putting a time limit on stuff, like saying this book has to be done by the end of this quarter, we just say, here's the order of steps I'm going to do. First, I'm going to outline Act 1, then I'm going to outline Act 2, and then I'm going to, start writing, and I'm going to write 2 hours every day until this is done, and not put a restriction on, I'm going to write 2,000 words a day. And I'm not putting a restriction that this book has to be done by November 1st, but instead I'm just saying I dedicate myself to this amount of time per day, as often as I can realistically do it. And I'm not going to beat myself up if I miss a day, or I have a fill-in like low energy task I can do on days where I can't write. But I'm going to let things be like dominoes that fall over. So I say, okay, when Act 2 is done plotting, I start the rough draft. And then when the rough draft is done, or when I'm halfway through the rough draft, I contact my cover artist. So this way it's less time pressure and more where you can make it a game. Like, oh, if I can get to this point, then I can get my cover. And then if I can get to this point, I can set my pre-order. And then if I get to this point, I can get my ARC team involved, And so it's like, even if it takes me 4 months, it's okay, because I didn't have a deadline on that piece of it. That can often be helpful too.
Okay.
So hopefully I forget what the original question was. I just I
was just going to ask you about that though, with the pre-orders and all that sort of thing, like how would you go about doing that if you're not going to give yourself a specific deadline, but actually if you're going to gamify it like that, you do know when you get to do it, you just don't know the date.
Yeah.
Just don't know the date. Yeah. And it's like for different people, they might be comfortable setting up that pre-order at different stages. For some people, like once I start my rough draft, I'm ready to set the pre-order. But for me, that rough draft has to feel good. Like I know I'm within I know I've got the story figured out before I can set a pre-order, because it's too stressful for me to have to figure out more of the plot and potentially miss it. Because I have missed pre-orders in the past, and it was really difficult emotionally for me, because fans get very angry. I understand their anger. I'm not criticizing them, but it's just like, man, it felt like a real betrayal of my fans for me to do that, even though we are human and I should give myself grace. That was just really difficult for me. But it's knowing yourself and knowing what that process is for you, because I know people that can set 3 pre-orders and they just hit every one of them, but I can't do that. So it's just sort of knowing which place you're in, and then creating for yourself, like, what is a realistic game board for me? At what point in my process am I ready to knock that domino over that says pre-orders ready, or do you want to do pre-orders at all? Some people might not want to do them at all. And I think that's part of the joy of realizing, once you free yourself up to realize, like, oh, I get to be the game master here. I get to like decide how to play this game. And that, I think, is true of all of self-publishing, is you get to decide how you want to show up and how you want to play the game. And there are examples of success on every single point that you could make. People that are successful only with direct stores and Facebook ads, people who are making 7 figures who never do Facebook ads, people who are only on TikTok, people aren't on TikTok at all, people are all in KU, people are all wide. Like, you can find success anywhere. And so instead of listening to what everybody else is doing to try to decide what you want to do, see it as like, these are all tools in a toolbox, and I can choose, do I want the hammer, or do I want the screwdriver, or do I want, this one over here? And you can pick which tools align with who you are and what your strengths are and how you want to show up and how you want to feel on a day-to-day basis. And I think that puts the power back in our hands. It says, okay, I can do this. And then the struggle is having that faith and keeping the faith that as long as I continue to show up quarter by quarter, fixing my alignment, building my bridges. I'm mixing metaphors, but knocking over my dominoes. As long as I keep doing that, I feel that this future is possible for me, even if no one else can see that vision.
And knowing that you can change your mind. Sorry, Mindy.
No, I just think it's taking the control back, isn't it? Because there's just so much noise out there, like you were saying. There's just so much being thrown at you, and so many things to learn, and so many people succeeding, but you don't know their journey, you don't know how they got there, but you just see it. So it's really about taking the control back and working out what works for you, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
And
sorry, it's also sometimes, like you said, you don't know their journey. You see, maybe, like, you think about an iceberg and we see this little top percent, like we just saw the trajectory to the top, but we didn't know all the years of work they put into that beforehand, right? Or how much money they did spend on advertising, or who friends, or the specific circumstances of friends that helped push them to the top with their newsletters. Like, we don't always know the behind the scenes strategies there. So trying to replicate it isn't always a one-to-one kind of situation. And so we could really drive ourselves mad trying to replicate someone else's success, because there's so many tiny factors that go into that.
We definitely get that in the podcast. Every week we talk to someone else, and no one is ever doing it the same way. No two people, like, to this day, 8 years later. I would like you to talk a bit more, because you mentioned it earlier, and it kind of in line with what you're just talking about, finding our own way and taking control. As I think, and I know I did this, but people get stuck on finding the right way. Like, there's 2 decisions, and one's the right decision and one's the wrong, and I don't know which is which, and I stay here and don't make decisions and don't go anywhere. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes I call these crystal ball moments. So I feel like, part of my Publish and Thrive class, what I'm trying to do there is less focus on the specific tactics, like Facebook ads this or TikTok that, and say, here are the best practices that work for the majority of people. So some very base fundamental things that I think most of us need, which is understanding our genre or subgenre, understanding the type of book that we're writing so that we make sure we're meeting reader expectations, and of course still putting our own voice on it, but understanding how to best place that book in front of readers so that they can find the things that they're looking for, like matching yourself up with your ideal reader. Those are sort of fundamental things that we all need to know. And there are things you can do wrong there, like putting a young adult looking cover on a sexy romance that's not meant for young adults, like things like that. Those mismatches can keep us from finding our audience. So there, I think it's important to understand where's the right and where's the wrong, like how to edit your novel, how to get the fundamentals. But when we get into more advanced things like, should I be on TikTok or should I go with YouTube, or should I do direct sales or should I be in KU? Those kind of things, we could just spin and spin and spin and think, oh my gosh, which one is the one? And it's most of the time going to feel like, once we make a decision, that fear of what if I've made the wrong one? And then when we go down this path a certain way, most of us are not going to find instant number one success. And so there's always going to be in the back of our heads, I think for a lot of us, this fear of like kind of looking over our shoulder, like, oh, what if I had done that other one? And kind of like we touched on earlier, I think Wendy said it, it's like, but then you end up kind of halfway doing a bunch of different strategies and not really seeing the results. Cause like maybe you've listened to this podcast and you've gotten all those different strategies, but those people were like, I did this one, I did this one. And we're over here like, I'm going to try to do all 5 of these. So we're not really putting the magic into it. But the reason we do that, I mean, don't beat yourself up if that's been you, is because we don't know which one of those. It's like, spin the wheel, you know. And so I call these crystal ball moments that sometimes in our career, or a lot of times in this career, we're going to hit moments where we say, I have all the information about what's working. And I, short of someone showing up at my house right now and with a crystal ball that works, there's no way I can know which way is the right way. And so all I can do at this point, instead of just spinning my wheels or trying them both, is say, for this next 90 days, I'm going to go this way and go all in with this one and stop spending any energy, any attention to the other things. Just say, I'm going to go all in on TikTok. If I can repurpose that content easily, I will, but I'm not going to start a podcast. I'm not going to start a YouTube channel. I'm just going to do TikTok this 90 days and go all in on that strategy, learn everything you can about it and go all in, and then see how you feel about it. Like Wendy, you said you tried it, wasn't something that aligned. It made you feel drained, right?
Yeah. I actually quite enjoyed the process of it and the making, but I had no results. So it was really just was no point in me continuing.
Right. So now that becomes something that you can say, well, okay, I did that for 90 days. I can cross that off my list. What's the next strategy? Right. And as we're trying those new strategies, we keep on trucking on the things that are the basics, writing the good book, staying aligned, making sure our covers match the market, looking for ways to market our backlist, and like trying to keep that the real engine and the real like heart of our careers running. And then we add those on. And that's one of the reasons I love planning in quarters and in 90-day segments, because when you try to say, this is the year I do this, we tend to put too much on our plate. And then we don't have reflection points where we can stop and say, is this working or not? And we could just end up continuing on with a strategy that's not working at all. So 90 days gives us enough time to try it out and see. But then it gives us a stopping point to stop and reflect and say, is this working? How do I feel? Does this align? Do I want to keep doing it? Do I want to shift my strategy, or do I just want to try something else entirely? And I think if we can cultivate, if you're capable of cultivating an attitude of experimentation and making it fun, like for me, that always comes back. We were talking about kind of being students, right? Like stationary lovers and stuff. For me, it always comes back to that sort of fun, like giving myself a star, which I know sounds silly to some people, but for some of us, it's fun. It's like moving the sticky notes down, giving ourselves a little star, saying, okay, I said I was going to post reels for 90 days and see what happens. So I give myself a star for day 14, and then I keep going, and I pay attention and I make a game out of it, rather than putting this expectation on ourselves that like, if this fails, everything fails, or like, if this doesn't work, then I'm no good. Like, don't let the success or failure of that experiment mean anything about you as a person or you as a writer, but just make it a fun experiment. And eventually, if you can put that sort of fun in it instead of that like heavy weight of expectation on it, you're going to land on something that really works for you.
Yeah.
Wise words.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So true.
I'm glad you said that about the 90 days. Actually, I was going to ask you about that. So that's awesome. So we're coming towards the end of our time together. So I just want to ask you if there's one piece of advice that you could give to authors out there about, I don't know, any of this kind of getting organized, planning kind of things. What would it be? What was your final words?
Oh, I am number one futuristic in strengths language, which I know a lot of authors know because of Becca Syme. I'm number one futuristic. So I know this doesn't resonate with everyone, but my always like number one advice is to step away from everybody else, what everybody else is doing, all the other strategies, and that feeling that you're behind, and give yourself a new starting point. Just say, okay, I wiped the slate clean. I'm going to take a moment for myself, and give yourself the gift of imagining what your ideal future would be. And just saying, not just like what I want to accomplish, like, oh, I want to have this car, or I wish I had this, but like really take like 5 to 10 minutes. And something we do in the courses is, you'll hear people say, write a letter to your future self, but I do it the other way. I said, let your future self write you a letter of where they are and what they've accomplished and how they feel. What type of house are they living in? What types of books are they writing? Are they having peace? And sometimes you'll be really surprised by the things that come through in that letter, because you might realize a secret desire of your heart that your future self kind of whispers back in time to you that says, wow, I don't really care so much about like a big flashy house and a car. I just really want to like spend more time with my kids and go on more vacations. And that can be like a moment that a lot of people haven't given themselves permission to really dream about, because we feel, as some of the conversation went today, we feel that pressure to live up to other people's expectations. And just giving yourself that gift of a moment in meditation to think, 5 years from now, what do I wish my ideal day looked like? Most of us are going to wish we're making more money, but very few of us are going to think, I wish I was working harder than this. I wish I had more of my time filled, right? Most of us are going to be thinking, oh, I wish I had a little bit more freedom. I wish my books were doing really well. I wish I was joyful. Like, those are the kind of things we're going to think about, but it's going to look different to each of us as individuals. But if you can create that vision and give yourself real permission to dream and to be what you truly want, what you want in your heart, not what anyone else expects of you, and then pull yourself back from that to like open your eyes to the present day with your clean slate and say, okay, how do I start right now bringing that ideal vision into my current reality? Because there will be moments that you can look around and say, okay, like I may not have like this office for me. This was a dream of mine for more than a decade, but now I'm here, right? But it's like I had to pull in aspects of the things I love about this space into a dining room table at one point. But we can pull in, how do I think that future office will feel? How do I think it will feel to have a house full of kids? Or how do I think it will feel to have a career where I'm connecting? Like, community has always been a core value for me. So how will that feel? And how can I get started on that right now and let go of all the things that no longer align for me? And give yourself that permission and be brave enough to say, I'm not going to live my life pushing myself to limits that are unhealthy for me, just out of fear that I'm never going to be who I was meant to be. Because the only way to get to who you were meant to be is to align yourself with that. And it's not going to be from working yourself to death. It's going to be from following your heart, following the things that you were most passionate about, and really having the courage to say no to the things that aren't for you.
Oh my God.
Oh, you're awesome. I love you.
You like just talk to us every day like that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to replay this every day.
It's so true.
That is very, very true.
Well, the good news is you can go to Sarah's YouTube channel and you can listen to it every day, which is more often than not for myself, just saying, and experience that.
That's awesome. And so if someone is listening to this and thinks they want to get more of you, where are the best places to go?
So the number one place is to go to youtube.com/heartbreathings. So a lot of people ask, like, heart beatings, heart what? So it comes from the Wordsworth quote, fill your paper with the breathings of your heart, of write what you love, fill your stories with what your heart is telling you. So that's where heart breathings comes from, for anybody wondering. So youtube.com/heartbreathings, or you can go to heartbreathings.com to find links to my courses and things like that. We run the HB90 course every quarter, so it'll run again in December, and then my Publish and Thrive course will run in February next year. So that is a in-depth course on self-publishing and how to get started. And then if you're interested in reading my books, if you like young adult contemporary fantasy, portal fantasies, and witches, then you can go to sarracannon.com, and my name is spelled with 2 R's and no H, so it's SARRA. CANNON. And I just had my website over there redone, and it's beautiful. So go take a look.
We're going to go and have a look.
It is.
Everyone go there.
I've had a look. It's beautiful.
Me too. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And where can we be found, Char?
We can be found at spargirlspodcast.com. We're on Facebook, and we're also on YouTube at Spargirls Podcast. And you absolutely need to watch this on YouTube, because Sarah is the cutest, cute as a button in her headphones. So if you do nothing else, you need to go and watch this video. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We're almost at 2,000, and it would be wonderful to achieve that by the end of the year. So
yes, awesome.
Thank you.
And don't forget, if you want to come and help support the podcast, you can join us on Patreon. We'd love to see you there, and we've got some excellent little tips. And
we've tweaked our tiers, as they say.
Tweaked our tiers.
That's tiers as in IERS, not TEAR.
No tears. No tears.
No one cried. No one cried in the making of this.
I could see. I was getting a little misty-eyed when Sarah was talking there, just saying.
Thank
you so much.
Anyway,
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. We'll be back again next week. But for now, farewell.
Bye.
Well,
Bye.
bye.